Welcome back to tonight's special Inside the Issues. American civil rights organizations used to care about, well, civil rights. That's not surprising. In fact, it's good. But recently, the NAACP has declared that it regards climate change as a civil rights issue and has said that Martin Luther King's vision for America cannot be achieved without, quote, environmental justice, whatever that is. We spoke to Blackbelt citizens organizer Portia Shepard about this shift. Here it is. Portia Shepard, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, Tucker.
So it's a little bit confusing for a couple reasons. The most obvious is I agree with both goals, a clean environment and racial equality, but it's hard to see exactly how they're tied together. How are they?
Well, I personally cannot speak for the NAACP, but what I can speak for is the environmental injustice that we're having here in the Black Belt of Alabama. And part of it is, you know, as it relates to what Dr. King stood for, he stood for justice and stand up for injustices that are happening in all kinds of communities. When you look at here in the great state of Alabama, it's not just in the Black Belt of Alabama. It just so happened that in Lawrence County and in Macon County, they're experiencing this same fight as it relates to environmental injustices. It just so happened that in our community, majority of the individuals who are facing these problems are people of color.
Okay, but I mean, by that standard, couldn't you say Martin Luther King fought for justice, and he did, and it's unjust for the government to take most of what you earn? I think we'd all agree they shouldn't take most of it.
Oh, yeah.
So Martin Luther King would be in favor of lower tax rates. But he didn't talk about lower tax rates, and he didn't talk about global warming, so maybe we shouldn't get him involved in those issues.
But as it relates to justice and fighting injustice, I'm assuming, because I did not make those particular statements, but I'm assuming because through the legacy of what Dr. King stood for, that's the same message that we're using and the same the tools that we're using in this fight for environmental justice. When you have time and time again, when you have the communities, especially in the Black Belt of Alabama, that don't have accurate sewage, you have communities that are being poisoned by coal ash. So when you have these things, one would think that it must be a civil rights issue because a lot of the communities that are being affected by this, Tucker, are people of color. So in that aspect of it, I can definitely understand that.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of see what you're saying. I mean, there's no doubt that poorer people live in crummier places. They tend to live in places that are more polluted. There are a bunch of reasons for that, some of them obvious, some of them sinister, I agree. But I mean, the most polluted places on Earth, I don't know, Ukraine, where the Chernobyl disaster happened, has no people of color, but has a lot of poor people. And so I guess the problem I have with this is if you frame it as a racial issue, then it scares people and makes them think that there's a conspiracy to pollute just because of their skin color. And if we don't have evidence that's true, we probably shouldn't suggest it, right?
I agree to a certain extent, but as far as the class point that you made up, I absolutely agree with that. That's one of the reasons why I brought up Lawrence and Macon County. That's a predominantly white area, but the median income is similar to what's happening down there in Perry County, which is between $10,000 and $17,000 a year. So you have to say that this is definitely a point of class, and it's not so much that we just want to live in a poor area. It's just that me personally, I can just speak for myself. I inherit land in that particular area. I'm not just going to give it up because it's a poor area. And I think it's unfair, especially for that particular community where you have majority of the people who live there that own their land have to give it up because you have politicians and people who are in power who made decisions to dump these particular issues on them. And that's one of the fights that Black Belt citizens is fighting. It's not so much, you know, of, oh, it's civil rights, oh, it's black power. No, it's not about that. It's about helping people stand up for themselves and get the justice that they deserve. People deserve clean water. My aunt has no business buying 3 to 4 cases of water a week just so she can cook a meal because she's afraid to drink the water that is coming out of her faucet. Those things should not be happening. And it just so happened when you talk about civil rights issue and you see it in Lowndes County, you see it in Gee's Bend, you see it definitely in Uniontown, Alabama, that these issues are definitely taking place. And it just so happened in that area, it is people of color, but it's definitely a class issue.
Well, I got to say, I kind of agree with a lot of what you're saying. And just I can't resist saying, I hope you don't sell your land, because some of the prettiest places in this country are poor places, or rural areas, a lot prettier than downtown Los Angeles or Beverly Hills, I would say. But maybe
a lot safer.
Yeah, a lot safer, nicer people. But maybe part of the problem is that the people in charge ignore and exploit rural America. Do you ever think of that?
Oh, absolutely. You just hit the nail on. I mean, and that goes back to that class statement that you made earlier. It goes right back to that. You know, even though I'm enduring the same stuff you're enduring, but because I got a little bit more than you, then I can keep you. I can feel like I'm above it, and that's the biggest issue of it all. And so that's what Dr. King was about. You know, that poor people campaign that he was getting ready to kick off before his assassination. You know, it was poor people. He didn't say poor blacks. He said poor people, and that's important to understand that when you see it time and time again, environmental justice throughout this great nation, it is specifically in poor community, and more than likely, people of color will be affected by that.
Yeah. Well, I kind of agree with what you're saying, and I like rural Alabama because they're nice
agree?
people.
I can't believe it.
You know, I basically agree. And I appreciate your coming on tonight. Portia, thanks a lot for that.
Thank you so much, Tucker. Thank you so much for having us.
Well, and another of the most important issues facing this country, horse meat. Should you eat it? An advocate says the whole country can benefit by eating Seabiscuit. That's next. Now the issue of horse meat. Eating horses has been taboo for almost all of American history, and with good reason. But recently, Congress has considered changing U.S. law to revive the American horse slaughter industry. Here's what horse meat advocate Dave Duquette had to say about it. Watch. Dave, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks, Tucker. Thanks for having me on.
So this, as you well know, strikes a lot of people, particularly in cities, as horrifying. Why is it a good idea?
It's mainly a welfare issue, Tucker. It's the welfare of horses in the horse world is it's gone downhill ever since. When you have something that doesn't have any value at all, which is what the unwanted horse is, they end up getting shipped to Canada or Mexico, and they're not worth anything.
Right. We have that problem with a lot of domesticated animals, certainly with cats and dogs, and unfortunately we euthanize a lot of them. It's really sad, but we don't eat them because it feels like it's crossing the line because we're so close to them. Why are horses different?
Horses are considered livestock in every state in the union, and they're on average a 1,000-pound animal. And as far as euthanizing them, you start euthanizing the 150,000 unwanted horses a year, and you're talking about millions of pounds of toxic waste.
Oh, so it's a question of disposing it, and who would eat it?
Well, we have quite a market, actually. In 2011, when the writers came off the appropriations bill, my name was all over it because I was advocating for it. And I was contacted by the Tongan communities. There was one meat buyer in the south in Florida that said he had 2.3 million Hispanics down there that would eat it every day if they could get it.
I guess
many ethnic groups.
Right, but I mean, America's always been distinct in that we don't eat it, and the French do. And I mean, to be totally blunt with you, it's been for more than a century kind of a point of pride, a bragging point that, you know, you eat horses and we don't. Doesn't this kind of put us at the level of the French if we start doing it?
That's kind of a total misnomer, or however you want to put that. Over 50% of the world's countries eats horse meat every day. If you go around Europe, the whole European Union, you'll find more traditional horse meat recipes than you will any other type of meat. From the Chinese, the Mongolians, the Japanese, all the Indonesian countries, Africa, just about every country in Africa, if they can get a hold of horse meat, they'll eat it. South America, Mexico, if you've eaten tacos on the beach in Cabo, you've eaten some horse meat. Until 1985, horse meat was available on the menu at the Harvard Faculty Club. And the only reason they quit doing it was because the new chef, the meat came to him flash frozen, and the new chef did not want to cook anything that had been frozen. That's the only reason it went off, and that was all the way to 1985. We have a huge history of horse meat consumption in the United States, and the Humane Society of the United States will try to tell you that that's not so. Well, it is so. I mean, it doesn't take very much Googling and very much looking around to find that we did consume a lot of horse meat in the United States.
I thought it was just Lewis and Clark in an emergency in a blizzard, or the Donner Party or something. I had no idea. And you're making me rethink that vacation in Cabo.
We will make America great again.